Hello, my name is Lorelei Sampson, and this semester I have been fortunate enough to have been enrolled in Gender and Women's Studies 350 Feminist Theory, taught by Dr. Elizabeth Williams. This class has significantly improved my understanding of my positionality as a woman in America, and this class has also helped to correct some of my prior understandings on certain social issues. My aspiration for this presentation is to provide a general overview of 10 concepts within feminist theory that have somehow established incorrect mainstream understandings, and I will be providing you, the listener, with the truth of these 10 matters. I personally believe that the first step of enacting change is to provide people with the correct, accessible information, hence the creation of this myth-busting YouTube video. That being said, let the myth-busting begin. Alright, let's start at square one. Sex and gender. People, especially in the biomedical sphere, often do not see a distinction between sex and gender. And while both of these concepts are socially constructed, there is a great distinction. Sex is a way of classifying people based on certain biological markers. In our culture, this is generally viewed as binary. The idiosyncrasies that are used to classify all individuals as either male or female are chromosomes, genitalia/secondary sex characteristics, and hormones. Now, these characteristics all exist on a spectrum rather than classify individuals to a binary system. Gender is simply a set of social meanings that are ascribed to that classification. Think of gender roles or gender norms. There is a cultural need to maintain clear distinctions between the sexes. Let's turn slightly and look at people that are intersex, people that challenge the distinction between sex. Society's need for a binary sex system leads to the control and correction of intersex bodies. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We will come back to the binary sex construct that society is so hell-bent on maintaining in another myth that I have to debunk. For now, I want to summarize this first popular myth by stating clearly that sex and gender are not interchangeable terms, and that an individual's sex does not determine their gender. This next misconception is significantly less harmful but still worth the clarification. This myth of bra burning as an act of female liberation originated in reference to the radical feminist protests of the 1968 Miss America pageant. The motives behind this protest can be reasonably deduced based on the Miss America pageant beauty standards of 1968 that only showcase select women that portray traits deemed societally desirable, such as having a great body, long hair, perfect smile, single, young, white, flirty, but not hypersexual, and the list goes on. Protesters advocate that the image of Miss America was oppressing women everywhere. The specific origin of the bra burning myth came from the Freedom Trash Can, which did actually exist at the Miss America protests of 1968. But rather than burning bras in the Freedom Trash Can, these women discarded instruments of female torture, such as high heels, makeup, corsets, pots and pans, Playboy magazines, and more. Yet, oddly enough, no bras were burned. So, in the end, debunking this myth probably isn't going to abolish the patriarchy. But maybe now, next time you're at a protest and you hear someone screaming, "Burn the bras!" you know the history of that statement and what it symbolizes. Okay, so the next popular misconception that we need to examine is the mainstream view of twerking as a sexual act. I will be honest, prior to being exposed to the content of this class, and based on the media interpretations of twerking that I had been exposed to, I assumed twerking was a sexual dance. As Aria Holiday does a great job explaining, twerking is historically a powerful tool of self-expression used by Black girls. Not only is twerking a form of self-expression on an individual scale, but twerking with others also holds cultural significance. When talking about twerking, we must also talk about how twerking gained its popularity in America through white women like Miley Cyrus. Now, why is this? Well, have you ever heard of misogynoir? Misogynoir is the prejudice against Black women that takes into account intersectional oppression on both racial and gender basis. There are so many things in popular culture today that are a production of Black women, yet Black women never receive the credit. So, to give Black women some of the credit and respect they deserve, I want to correct the popular misconception that twerking is some sexual dance. Twerking is a Black girl epistemology. It functions as a tool of self-expression and empowerment. Monogamy in the United States and Western culture in general is the unquestionable social expectation for everyone. Obviously, if you know anything about the United States, you know the prevalency of monogamy is not a myth, yet a reality. The myth that I am trying to dismantle here is that monogamy and the nuclear family are the only ways to find fulfillment and exist within society. As Angela Wiley and Sarah Giordano bring to light in their chapter, Why Do Voles Fall in Love?, monogamy is viewed as, quote, the stable ground from which we do the asking. It is an assumed essential universalism of human nature. But why are we so close-minded to other forms of partnership? Well, think about what typically guides and creates our social norms. Legal policies that allow benefits to individuals who perform what's deemed socially normative. The majority of accessible literature, especially in the public education system, which only provides example and analysis of monogamous relationships. Media, such as all popular dating shows that glorify the longing for a monogamous relationship. And then, in the sense of Western culture, we still have colonial religious roots that our society was built on, which are still very much still in existence in today's society. The misconception around monogamy in our society is that it is the only way to have a romantic relationship, when historically, polyamory has always been a highly functioning form of intimacy all over the world. Our society and Western culture would have us all believe that monogamy is the inevitable end goal to everyone's future. But I want to inform you that the truth is, monogamy isn't the only answer. And if you feel that's not what's meant for you, there's nothing wrong with that. One misconception that is the basis of many political policies being enacted right now is the idea that individuals who feel aligned with a non-binary identity are just doing so out of this recent social exposure to the transgender community and non-binary existence. This view functions on the premise of there being no historical existence of people identifying outside of the gender binary. But the reality is, non-binary people have been around since the dawn of civilization, and I mean this literally. The earliest records of human civilization come from 2000 BC in Mesopotamia, where several depictions of individuals that express gender nonconformity have been discovered, along with records that describe how God created these people. Next, moving down the timeline, we have the Isra community that exists in South Asia, that established in roughly 400 BC and still exists in a small scale. Israelis are considered neither male nor female and are officially recognized as a third gender in the Indian subcontinent. Continuing, we have the Scythians from the 7th century, who are Eurasian nomadic people that honored individuals who did not conform to one gender as priests or warriors. This society also invented the earliest known hormone therapy with the use of licorice root. Yet another example of historical non-binary existence is the pre-colonial America, where indigenous peoples used the term two-spirited to recognize the many different types of gender that individuals can embody. The last example I'm going to give of historical non-binary existence is from the year 100, where Halasha, Jewish law, recognizes intersex and non-conforming gender identities. Halasha ultimately recognizes 6 distinct genders. I know that was a lot. So, to summarize everything I just said, there is an incredibly long history of individuals identifying outside of the binary gender construct that Western culture tries to present as this unquestionable basis of human life. So, as much as politicians are currently trying to scare our nation into believing that the transgender community has just suddenly appeared and is now trying to recruit all of our precious children into their non-binary army, that is simply just a myth. The truth of the matter is, non-binary identities have been in existence since the birth of human civilization. Moving on to another popular misconception that has developed, we have the idea that within the trans community there are simply trans men and trans women, when in reality the trans community is extremely diverse. To debunk this myth, I want to shine a light on the wide spectrum of gender expression within the trans community. First, trans feminine describes people who were assigned male at birth but who identify with a more feminine gender identity. Trans masculine describes people who were assigned female at birth but who identify with a more masculine identity. And trans androgynous people are assigned either sex at birth but feel more aligned with both or neither genders and embody a non-binary or gender-fluid identity. The trans community is far more diverse than the surface level that I just described to you. But the overarching point that I am trying to make is that the trans community exists in a broad spectrum, rather than simply operating on another binary gender system. Alright, on to the next myth. Sex is binary. Western culture is deeply rooted in the idea that an individual is either male or female, and that is the entirety of the matter. The Western view of sex does not account for individuals who are born as firms, herms, or merms. These people that defy the binary sex construct, who are born with both male and female sex characteristics, are generally not discussed. But when they are typically lumped into the category of intersex. Intersex individuals pose a threat to Western idea of binary sex, which is why, immediately upon entry into the world, intersex babies are assigned a sex, and they are surgically and hormonally corrected to be, quote, normal heterosexual males or females. Anne Fausto Sterling explains in her article, The Five Sexes, that the intentions behind changing intersex babies' bodies to fit into society as either male or female is based in good intentions to provide a child with the ability to fit in. Yet these intentions are rooted in the idea of there only being two sexes. So, as I bring this rant to a close, I want to summarize all of this by saying clearly the idea of sex existing only within a binary is a major myth that Western culture presents as this undeniable basis of humanity. The truth of the matter is
that sex is not binary and rather exists on a continuum that is composed of at least 5 sexes.
Islamophobia is the dislike or prejudice against Islam or Muslims. This way of thinking is very popular in American society, and this entire idea is rooted in misconception. After 9/11, fear and hatred of Muslims in the United States absolutely skyrocketed, and anti-Muslim discourse increased exponentially. 9/11 created an era of portraying regions by their supposedly monolithic, most extreme version of a religion. We often see anti-Muslim discourse in the political realm, such as Donald Trump's implemented Muslim bans. But why? Well, the answer, like everything else political, all stems from the money. By political powers painting Islamic individuals as the other that we, the United States, are in contrast to, it then allows them to oppress Islamic individuals, and it appears as this action is serving the country's best interest, which ultimately equates to votes and economic support. This brings me to nationalism, which functions on the idea that the best way to create a nation that people identify with is giving that nation an adversary, aka creating the other. The entire premise of Islamophobia is rooted in misconception, stereotypes, and myths. The truth of this matter shouldn't be necessary to state, but for the sake of clarity, I will. Islamic individuals, or people who identify as Muslims, are not a threat to United States society any more than a white evangelical Christian. Humanity is not deemed or determined by one's religious views or culture.
In the process of debunking the previous myth, I mentioned nationalism, which is the idea of identifying as a part of a nation state. And within the United States, nationality is often depicted as heterosexual. Until recently, that is. The United States now likes to portray itself as inclusive and supportive of gay rights. But the reality of this matter is the LGBTQIA+ community does not have the privileges and support that our nation likes to portray that they do. Nor does this community often experience queer life the way that individuals deemed to represent them do. Homonormativity is the idea of representing the gay community through the form that is easiest to digest. A great example of this is Mitchell and Cameron from Modern Family, who are two well-off white men living in the suburbs of Los Angeles who function as very PC gay lovers. I doubt Mitchell and Cameron experience the same oppressions as a black androgynous lesbian in Western Kentucky. You get the point. When we combine the idea of nationalism and homonormativity, we establish the common myth portrayed by our nation, that is, the queer community in the United States is not oppressed, and rather they are welcomed, at least in a homonormative context. Pinkwashing is when a country promotes themselves as being gay-friendly to cover up any underlying oppressions and to combat any possible critiques. Through the use of pinkwashing and homo-nationalism, the United States has painted this image of being superior to the rest of the world because our society supposedly accepts the queer community and offers them privileges that other countries don't. This fictitious national image that has been created through pinkwashing and homo-nationalism itself systematically oppresses the queer community by basically saying, look how good you have it here. You shouldn't be complaining. To conclude the debunking of this myth, the idea that the United States does not oppress people who identify as homosexual is unquestionably a myth created to promote the United States' national image as well as to contribute to continually oppressing the queer community. The last myth and widespread misconception that I'm going to deflate today is the idea that the patriarchy no longer exists in our society and that men and women have all the same rights, privileges, and absence of oppression. The truth of this matter is the patriarchy is still currently systematically upholding male hierarchies and maintaining social stratification. Prior to colonialism, humanity functioned in egalitarian societies where men and women had equal status and their contributions were viewed as equally beneficial. I recently read a scholarly journal written by Suzanne Spencerwood, in which Spencerwood examines the patriarchal power dynamics inherently in use with the spread of colonialism. The understanding of patriarchal powers being inscribed in colonialism proves the existence of the patriarchy because we currently live in a society that upholds colonial powers. Now, if my rant on the patriarchal power dynamics within colonialism didn't provide to you the reality of the patriarchy's existence, that's okay, because I have a few more avenues of evidence that might be more relevant to daily observations. For example, if you're a woman listening to this, I am sure you can relate to the idea that men in our society hold the moral authority. Whether it's what a woman should be wearing, who a woman should be sleeping with, what a woman has to say, or even what a woman can do with her body, the societal expectations are set by men. One perfect example of men holding the moral authority within our society is the idea that when a woman sleeps with several men, her worth decreases exponentially, and she is labeled with derogatory slurs. While on the other side of the spectrum, when a man sleeps with many women, his worth generally increases, and he may be labeled as a player, but he wouldn't be called a whore. The next inequality constructed from the patriarchy that I feel the need to discuss is the idea that a woman's only purpose is to reproduce, and that if she chooses not to or can't reproduce, she is not a real woman or she is not fulfilling her potential. When men decide not to have children or can't, it doesn't become a question of if they're really a man. And then, with this discussion of reproduction, we also need to talk about the motherhood penalty and fatherhood bonus. The motherhood penalty shows that for each child a woman has, her income decreases by about 4%, while when a man becomes a father, his income increases by roughly 6%, which is the fatherhood bonus. These statistics came from studies that controlled for marital status, hours worked, education, and experience. So the variable being tested here wasn't parenthood, but rather isolating variable of gender. So basically, our society establishes that to be a woman, you must inevitably reproduce, and then once you reproduce, you are punished for it through your career status and income levels. I could continue to sit here and dissect the abundance of societal structures that have been created by and for the upholding of the patriarchy for hours, maybe even days. But I would like to think that based on the explanation I have provided thus far, it is clear that the patriarchy is still regretfully alive and well in our society today. So, the next time someone tries to tell you that the patriarchy no longer exists because legally women have the same rights as men, and hell, we've got a female vice president right now. How the hell could the patriarchy exist? You will know the truth. Because the truth of the matter is, to abolish the patriarchy and to truly reach gender equality, we must first understand that there still is a patriarchy that we have to abolish.